You did the brave thing. You turned around, walked into the dark, and faced what most people spend a lifetime running from. You looked into the mirror of your shadow, and it didn't kill you. You've touched the rage that lived beneath your people-pleasing. You've felt the grief you buried under productivity. You've named the parts of yourself you were taught to hide. But now that the storm has passed, you're left standing in the stillness, asking the one question no one prepared you for. What now? What do you do when you've done the work, but the world feels different? When you're no longer the person you used to be, but you're not sure who you're becoming? If that question is sitting in your chest right now, you're not alone, and you're exactly where you need to be. They told you shadow work would set you free, and in a way it did. You're no longer pretending, no longer numbing, no longer performing the exhausting dance of being who everyone else needed you to be. But no one told you how quiet would be after, how empty the world would feel when you could no longer play the old roles that once defined you. The people who once understood you now feel distant, like you're speaking a language they can't quite hear. Your job feels hollow. The tasks that once gave you purpose now feel like elaborate distractions from something deeper calling your name. Your relationships? Fragile. Not because they're broken, but because you can no longer pretend that surface-level connection satisfies the part of you that's awakened. You're not in pain the way you used to be. The sharp edges of unprocessed trauma have softened, but you're not fully alive either. You're in between who you were and who you're becoming. In between the old world that no longer fits, and a new world you can't quite see yet. And it's in that in-between space that most people get lost again, because we were never taught how to live after the mask falls. We were never given a map for what comes after you stop running from yourself. The self-help industry talks endlessly about the breakthrough, but no one talks about the breakdown that follows. Not the kind that destroys, but the kind that quietly dismantles everything you thought you knew about yourself. Pause here and take a breath. Is this what you've been carrying all along? This sense of being caught between worlds, of having outgrown your old life, but not yet grown into your new one? Carl Jung once said, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality." You've met the challenge. You've sat with the uncomfortable truth of your wholeness. The light and the dark, the sacred and the profane, the angel and the devil that both live within you. But the work doesn't end at awareness. In fact, that's where it begins. You see, facing your shadow cracks the shell. But healing is the slow, unsexy act of living with what you've found. You've touched the rage, the years of swallowed words, of biting your tongue when your soul screamed for truth. You've felt the shame, the parts of yourself you learned to exile, because they weren't palatable to a world that prefers its people packaged neatly. You've sat with the ache of abandonment, not just by others, but by yourself. The ways you left yourself behind, to be loved, to be safe, to belong. But have you let them speak? Have you learned their language? Have you discovered that your rage isn't destructive? It's discerning? That your shame isn't evidence of your brokenness, but proof of your sensitivity in a world that numbs itself to stay functional? The world rewards those who bounce back, who turn their pain into productivity, their trauma into triumph, their breakdown into a brand. But you, if you're honest, are not bouncing. You're standing still, quiet, feeling everything. And that's not failure. That's transformation. Unsexy, invisible, spiritual rebirth. Most people don't survive this phase. They feel the silence and panic. They interpret the stillness as stagnation and run back to the noise, the productivity, the hustle, the persona that once protected them from their own depth. Because it feels safer to perform than to be real. Safer to achieve than to simply exist. Safer to help others than to sit with the tenderness of your own becoming. But you're still here, in the quiet, in the unknown, in the space between who you were and who you're becoming. And that means something is awakening in you that no longer wants to hide. Let me tell you about Maya. 3 years ago, she was the friend everyone called when they needed saving. The one who worked 60-hour weeks and smiled through her exhaustion, who dated men who needed fixing, and wondered why love felt like drowning. Maya did everything right according to the world's standards. She was successful, helpful, liked. She was also disappearing. The panic attacks started small. A tightness in her chest during meetings. Tears in bathroom stalls. The strange sensation of watching her life from outside her body. Wondering who this person was. And when she became her, shadow work found Maya the way it finds most of us. Through crisis. Through the uncomfortable realization that the life she'd built was beautiful and completely wrong for her soul. She spent months in therapy, in journaling, in the terrifying work of excavating the parts of herself she'd buried to be palatable. The anger, the selfishness, the deep, aching need to matter that she'd learned to shame into submission. And then came the breakthrough. The moment she could finally see the patterns, name the wounds, understand the why behind her endless giving. But Maya called me 6 months later, crying. I thought I'd feel better, she said. I thought once I understood, I'd know what to do. But I just feel lost, like I'm floating. I don't know who I am when I'm not saving someone. Maya had done the hardest part. She'd faced her shadow, but no one had prepared her for what comes next. This is the stage where solitude becomes sacred, where your nervous system begins to detox from years of performance, where you stop seeking answers and start becoming the answer. And it hurts, not because you're broken, but because you're waking up to everything you once abandoned to be accepted. Your sensitivity, which they taught you as weakness, reveals itself as your superpower. Your need for alone time, which they labeled antisocial, becomes the space where you remember who you are. Your intolerance for small talk, which they called rude, transforms into a deep hunger for connection that matters. You're not becoming someone new. You're becoming who you always were, underneath the layers of conditioning and survival and the desperate need to belong somewhere, other than inside your own skin. In your journal tonight, ask yourself, what part of me did I abandon to be loved? What aspect of my true nature am I ready to welcome home? Now is when the shadow returns in a new form, not as trauma, but as temptation. The temptation to go back to sleep, to be liked, to be safe, to shrink back into someone the world finds easier to digest. Your ego, still reeling from the exposure, still grieving the death of the false self it spent so many years constructing, whispers seductively in your ear. Just soften your truth a bit. Smile more. Be normal again. This awakening thing is making people uncomfortable. Maybe you were happier when you didn't know so much. Maybe ignorance really was bliss. And for a moment, the old life looks appealing. The simplicity of not feeling so deeply. The ease of relationships that don't require you to show up fully. The comfort of dreams that don't demand your whole soul. The safety of staying small, of not threatening anyone with your growth. But you know too much now. You felt too much. You've tasted what it's like to be authentic, and you can't unfeel that freedom. You can't unsee what you've seen or unknow what you know about yourself. And that's terrifying, because the further you walk into your truth, the lonelier it gets. You'll find yourself at dinner parties, surrounded by people you once called friends, feeling like an alien observing a species you no longer belong to. Their conversations about nothing will feel hollow. Their laughter will sound forced. Their complaints about problems you once shared will seem like echoes from past life. You'll nod and smile and participate, but part of you will be floating above the scene, marveling at how you ever found meaning in these interactions that now feel like elaborate dances around anything real. You'll sit in meetings at work, listening to people discuss quarterly projections and strategic initiatives, and wonder how you ever cared about any of it. How you ever derived meaning from numbers on a spreadsheet when there are souls to tend and mysteries to explore, and your own heart crying out for attention after decades of neglect. You'll scroll through social media and feel like you're looking at advertisements for a life you no longer want to buy. The carefully curated highlights, the performance of happiness, the endless striving for more, it will all feel exhausting rather than inspiring. You'll start grieving a life you no longer belong to. Friends who no longer feel like home. Dreams that now feel like cages. Versions of yourself that once brought you pride, but now feel like costumes you've outgrown. And this grief, it's sacred. It's the death of your false self. The ego death that makes room for your authentic being to breathe. But death, even sacred death, is never comfortable. David spent his 20s climbing the corporate ladder, believing that success meant safety, that achievement meant worth. He was good at his job, brilliant actually. By 30, he was making six figures, had the corner office, the respect of his colleagues, the life his parents had dreamed of for him. But shadow work revealed the frightened child beneath the suit, the boy who learned that love was conditional on performance, that his worth was measured by his achievements rather than his inherent value as a human being. David's shadow work began when he found himself crying in his car after another successful day. He'd just received a promotion, a raise, recognition for a project that had consumed his life for months. He should have been celebrating. Instead, he felt empty. The therapy sessions were brutal. David discovered that his drive for success was really a desperate attempt to earn his father's approval. A father who'd been emotionally absent, who'd measured love in terms of grades and trophies, and eventually salaries and status symbols. He realized he'd never asked himself what he actually wanted. His entire adult life had been spent pursuing goals that weren't really his, trying to become someone he thought would finally be worthy of love. After his breakthrough, David couldn't go back to caring about market share and profit margins the way he used to. The work felt meaningless. The competition felt petty. The late nights felt like a betrayal of something precious in him that he was finally starting to value. His colleagues noticed. His performance, while still competent, lacked the ruthless edge that had driven his success. His boss noticed. The young lion who'd once stayed until midnight reviewing reports was now leaving at 5 to take walks in the park. His girlfriend, who'd fallen in love with his ambition, definitely noticed. "You've changed," she said one night, and it wasn't a compliment. "You're not driven anymore. You're different, softer. I don't know if I like it." David faced a choice that everyone on this path faces. Betray your awakening to keep your life intact, or honor your truth and let the cards fall where they may. For months, he tried to have it both ways. He'd show up to work and perform enthusiasm he didn't feel. He'd go to networking events and play the ambitious professional while feeling like he was suffocating. He'd laugh at his girlfriend's jokes about his midlife crisis while something inside him withered. But the split was killing him. The dissonance between who he was becoming and who he was pretending to be created a different kind of suffering. Not the sharp pain of unconscious wounds, but the dull ache of betraying yourself after you know better. Finally, David chose truth. He didn't quit his job dramatically or end his relationship with fanfare. He simply stopped pretending, stopped performing passion he didn't feel, stopped smiling when his soul was crying, stopped saying yes when everything in him was screaming no. He started setting boundaries at work. He stopped volunteering for projects that didn't align with his values. He began speaking up in meetings when he disagreed with decisions that felt unethical or short-sighted. The relationship ended. Some friendships faded. His career trajectory shifted as he stopped playing the games that once felt necessary for survival. But something else happened. Something his ego couldn't have predicted. He started attracting people who saw him, really saw him, who were drawn not to his performance, but to his presence, who didn't need him to be anything other than exactly who he was in that moment. His work, while different, became more meaningful. He couldn't fake enthusiasm for meaningless projects, but he found himself deeply invested in work that aligned with his values. He took a pay cut to join a nonprofit, and for the first time in his adult life, he looked forward to Monday mornings. His solitude, instead of feeling like isolation, became a sanctuary where he could hear his own voice clearly for the first time in his adult life. This is what Jung meant when he spoke about individuation. Not becoming someone special, but becoming specifically yourself. Not perfection, but authenticity. Not the elimination of flaws, but the integration of all parts of yourself into a conscious whole. This is not a journey of becoming someone else. It's a journey of finally being yourself without apology. Integration means saying no without guilt, even when it disappoints people you love. It means understanding that their disappointment is about their needs, not your wrongness. It means speaking when your voice shakes, Because your truth matters more than your comfort. Because silence in the face of what's wrong is complicity with what's killing your soul. It means sitting with your own pain without reaching for distraction. Because you've learned that feelings are information, not emergencies. That emotions are messengers, and you've finally learned to listen to what they're trying to tell you. It means loving others without rescuing them. Because you understand that everyone has their own path to walk, their own lessons to learn, their own relationship with truth to develop. It means holding space for your complexity, your light and shadow, your wisdom and confusion, your strength and vulnerability, without trying to resolve the paradox into something neat and palatable. You're not here to fix yourself. You were never broken to begin with. You were just conditioned to believe that your authentic self wasn't acceptable, that you needed to be different to be worthy of love and belonging. You're here to remember yourself, the self that was buried beneath survival strategies and personas and the exhausting performance of being who you thought you needed to be to matter in this world. And that remembering is the most radical act of all. In a world that profits from your self-doubt, that depends on your insecurity to sell you solutions, that needs you to believe you're incomplete to keep you consuming, your wholeness is an act of rebellion. If this part hits something in you, keep going. The next few minutes might feel like a mirror. Take a breath and ask yourself, what would it look like to stop apologizing for who you are? You've seen your shadow. You've survived the fire of facing yourself completely. All the parts you were taught to hide, all the aspects of your humanity you learned to shame. Now, you must learn to live in the light without burning. You must learn to be authentic in a world that rewards performance, to be real in a culture addicted to artificial. And it's not easy. You'll walk into rooms and feel like a stranger, not because you're arrogant or superior, but because you're awake in a world that's still sleeping, because you've tasted freedom from the matrix of conditioning, and you can see the ways everyone else is still trapped in patterns they don't even recognize. You'll crave depth in conversations that never move beyond the surface. You'll hunger for authenticity in relationships built on mutual performance. You'll seek meaning in a culture addicted to distraction, to noise, to anything that keeps us from feeling the weight and wonder of being human. You'll find yourself unable to laugh at jokes that punch down, that derive humor from someone else's pain or marginalization. Unable to participate in gossip that diminishes others, that bonds people through shared judgment rather than shared joy. Unable to pretend that shopping or scrolling or any of the other numbing rituals that once comforted you still hold the same appeal. The small talk that once felt harmless now feels like a waste of precious life force. The complaints about traffic and weather and celebrities feel like elaborate ways of avoiding anything real. The endless discussions about who's dating whom and who's buying what feel like distractions from the deeper questions they're calling to you. You'll notice how much of social interaction is performance. People performing success, performing happiness, performing knowledge they don't really have about subjects they don't really care about. You'll see how much energy gets wasted in maintaining facades, in protecting images, in pretending to be someone other than who we actually are. But don't let that dishearten you. Don't mistake your awakening for alienation. Don't let the loneliness convince you that you've made a mistake in choosing authenticity over acceptance. The world may not clap for your truth, but someone, somewhere, will feel your presence and breathe easier. Not because you said something profound, not because you performed wisdom or displayed your spiritual awakening like a badge of honor. Not because you preached or taught or tried to convince anyone of anything, but because you dared to be real. Because in a world of masks, you showed up as yourself. Because in a culture of performance, you chose presence. Because in a society that profits from people feeling inadequate, you dare to be enough exactly as you are. Your authenticity gives others permission to be authentic. Your willingness to be vulnerable makes space for others to drop their armor. Your refusal to pretend creates an invitation for others to stop pretending too. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You never were. You're here to be true to yourself, to honor the path your soul is walking, to live in alignment with what you've discovered about who you really are. And that truth will cost you old relationships that were built on false connections, familiar comforts that were really forms of numbness, the safety of hiding in plain sight. But it will also free you from the exhaustion of maintaining a self that was never really you, from the constant vigilance required to monitor and modify your authentic responses, from the soul-crushing work of pretending to care about things that don't matter to you. You'll outgrow things without warning. Jobs that once excited you will feel hollow. Friends who once felt essential will drift away as you realize you have nothing real in common. Dreams that once seemed worth everything will reveal themselves as remnants from someone else's vision of what your life should look like. And this isn't failure. It's evolution. It's the natural result of becoming more yourself rather than trying to be what others expect. You'll speak less and listen more because you've learned to value depth over volume, wisdom over cleverness. You've discovered that the most powerful words are often the ones you don't say, the space you create for others to fill with their own truth. You'll cry over small things, a song that captures something you couldn't name, a stranger's unexpected kindness, the way light moves through trees in the late afternoon, because your heart, no longer armored against feeling, can be moved by beauty you once rushed past in your hurry to get somewhere else. And you'll smile over nothing at all, because joy you've discovered doesn't require a reason. Contentment doesn't need justification. Peace isn't something you achieve through effort. It's something you are when you stop fighting yourself. You're no longer reacting from old wounds or unconscious patterns. You're responding from a place rooted deeper than identity, deeper than personality, deeper than the story you once told yourself about who you had to be to survive in this world. This is what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole, of integrating all parts of yourself into a conscious, coherent being. It's not about perfection. It's about authenticity. It's not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming fully yourself. And it changes everything. The way you love, no longer from need or fear or the desperate attempt to get someone else to fill the holes in your sense of self, but from fullness and choice and the recognition that love is something you are, not something you get. The way you work, no longer to prove your worth or justify your existence, but to express your gifts, to contribute something meaningful, to use your time and energy in service of what matters to you. The way you rest, no longer as escape from a life you can't stand, but as reverence for your humanity, as recognition that you're not a machine designed for endless productivity, but a soul having a human experience. The way you move through conflict, no longer as war to be won or territory to be defended, but as opportunity for deeper understanding, for growth, for practicing the art of staying open when everything in you wants to close. You'll still have difficult days. You'll still face challenges, losses, disappointments. You'll still encounter your shadow in new forms, because growth is not a destination, but a spiral path that leads ever deeper into truth. But you'll meet these experiences differently now, with presence instead of panic, with curiosity instead of resistance, with trust in your ability to navigate whatever arises, because you've learned that you are both strong enough to feel everything and wise enough to let it move through you without getting stuck. Take a moment to notice. How has your relationship with difficulty changed? How do you show up differently now than you did before you began this work? What would it feel like to trust your ability to handle whatever life brings? Carl Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." You've earned that privilege, not by achieving something extraordinary, not by performing your way to worthiness, not by fixing every broken piece or resolving every contradiction, but by surrendering, by letting go of who you thought you had to be and embracing who you actually are. Now is not the time to seek more knowledge, more healing, more transformation. You've done the deep work. You've faced the darkness and integrated the light. Now is the time to live what you already know, to let your values become verbs, to let your insights become action, to let your truth become the quiet foundation from which you move through the world, to let your silence become a language, one that speaks to other souls who are tired of noise, hungry for depth, seeking something real in a world of facades. To let your choices reflect the truth you touched in the dark. Not perfectly, not all at once, but consistently, authentically, with the quiet courage of someone who knows who they are. You're no longer here to impress. Those days of performing for approval, of contorting yourself into shapes that others find palatable, are behind you. You are here to embody, to be a living example of what it looks like to honor your truth, to respect your boundaries, to love without losing yourself, to walk into the ordinary and make it sacred, to find the divine in washing dishes, in difficult conversations, in the simple act of breathing consciously in a world that's forgotten how to pause, to turn solitude into a sanctuary, not as escape from the world, but as the place where you remember who you are so you can show up authentically when the world calls, to breathe with reverence, to speak with intention, to love without rescuing, to give without depleting, to receive without guilt, to be not a brand, not a persona, not a carefully curated version of yourself, but a living truth. Complex, contradictory, beautifully human. This is your rebirth. It's not announced with fanfare. It doesn't come with certificates or congratulations. It's not loud or glamorous or Instagram-worthy, but it is holy. You survived facing your shadow. You walked through the fire of self-discovery and emerged not unburned, but transformed. Now live like it mattered. Not once, not as a peak experience you reminisce about, but every day. In small choices and big decisions. In how you treat yourself when no one is watching. In how you show up when the world invites you to shrink back into old patterns. And when the world does invite you to forget. And it will repeatedly, when society pressures you to go back to sleep, to be normal, to care about things that don't matter to your soul. You'll remember that you've touched something real, that you've seen behind the veil, that you know the difference between performance and presence, between ego and authenticity, between surviving and truly living. You'll remember that you are no longer chasing the light, trying to become something other than what you are. You are the fire. You are the light you've been seeking. You are the answer to the question you've been asking. Not because you're perfect, not because you figured it all out, but because you finally stopped running from yourself and started running toward your truth. And in that turning toward, in that homecoming to yourself, you become not just whole, but holy. This is what it means to survive facing your shadow and live to tell about it. Not by telling everyone what you've learned, but by being living proof that it's possible to face the darkness and emerge more yourself than ever before. Welcome home, to yourself, to your truth, to your magnificent, messy, sacred humanity. You made it, and now the real adventure begins. If this resonated with you, if you found yourself in these words, consider sharing this with someone who might need to hear it. And if you want to continue this conversation, to dive deeper into what it means to live authentically in an artificial world, I'd love to have you subscribe for more explorations into the sacred psychology of becoming human. But most importantly, live this. Make it real. Your truth is waiting, and the world needs who you really are.